Hey everyone, I'm Lucy, joined by Jake and Phil.
Hello.
Hey.
First point of order before we get into the video. Yes, we are aware that copies of Cyberpunk 2077 are out in the wild. Gameplay is out there. We're not going to be discussing any of that stuff. We're not going to be showing it. And if you are fearful of spoilers, may I suggest, just as a general practice, keeping clear of the comment section and the internet at large, but it's fine. We're not going to be discussing it in the video. So now that's out of the way, we are going to be discussing what sex and relationships are like in Cyberpunk 2077.
So Phil, you recently got to play 16 hours of it. I played about 4 hours a couple months ago. And one thing I didn't really get to experiment or try out too much were the relationships. And that's something that you actually did kind of get to explore a little bit. Can you go in depth, at least as much as you can, with the 16 hours you had about how that works? Because I know they said they were doing some ambitious things with it in 2077.
It seems like the way it works is mostly the more time you spend with people, the more you help them out, the deeper your relationship becomes. And it also seems like the game is paying attention to your dialogue choices and the way that you treat people, basically. So not every choice, it seems like in this game, is going to like split off with a bunch of different branches in the story. Maybe there's a little bit of different dialogue, but you know, in choice-based games like this, a lot of the times two choices will kind of take you in the same direction, even if the pathway is a little different for either one. But I do think that the game is kind of keeping track of what your attitude is like for different people and how you treat them and whether or not like they feel like they can trust you over time. So my sense of it was that, you know, if you act nice to Judy as you're helping her out, if she feels like you are helping her out, she'll, you know, rely on you later for more story quests. And then that could potentially grow the relationship further as you progress through her story.
It kind of reminds me of how the Bloody Baron worked in The Witcher 3, and that you meet him through the story, and then you get to a point where it kind of branches off and he's got his own little character arc, but it seems more involved in that. But that idea, I think, is a really good idea, because I think a lot of people will say one of their favorite arcs in The Witcher 3 was the Bloody Baron's side arc, which a lot of people could have entirely missed.
Right, yeah, that's the impression that I get too, is that you can blow past a lot of this stuff if you're not necessarily like paying attention or you're not prioritizing it. You know, you're gonna get communications, you're gonna from various characters, they're gonna hit you up on the phone, and then you like have that quest logged in your giant pile of side quests. I had a huge number of side quests at the end of my playthrough, and like when you get to it, you can progress that further. If you don't ever get to it, you might miss that altogether. It seems like they're not timed or anything. There's no way that you'll miss out on that stuff other than not doing it at all. So there's that, at least, because you'll have a lot going on.
So you say they hit you up. Is it very much a case of like, hey cousin, let's go bowling? Or is everything to do with, you know, just quests that they're giving you? Or are there opportunities to just hang out with people?
So I did kind of ask about this. I did bring up whether or not we can go bowling with Judy. I didn't get like a super straight answer on it, but my feeling is that like it's not going to be quite as, you know, hang out, be pals as that. It's much more of a, you're going to get messages on your phone that are like, hey, can you come help me with this thing? Or, hey, I have a dire situation. Or, hey, we're going to go meet up with someone else. It's going to lead to a story quest, but, you know, that sort of thing. It's not just like shooting pool with somebody or whatever. They do, though, just hit you up a little bit for conversations. That was a thing that seems to happen, especially as you grow your relationships. I got texts from Judy that were just like, hey, how's it going? How are you? You know, how are you holding up? You're going through a lot of stuff, that sort of thing. And I think those also count toward expanding the relationship and maybe unlocking further story quests if you get back and, you know, fire up your phone and just like hit replies, make choices on that. All that stuff seems to be like going into a big aggregate pile of how your relationship is going and leads to more side quests. And from there, I don't really know. I didn't actually finish out any of the quest lines, so I'm not sure exactly how far the relationships go in that regard, but that seems to be the way it works.
So I was gonna ask, is there any way, you know, in a Telltale-like-esque way, you can say, you know, Judy didn't like that? Is there any way of understanding how, I guess, well you're doing when you're having a conversation with someone or building that relationship? Or is it based purely on, there's no meter anywhere capturing how well your friendship is going? It's just all based on how the character reacts.
Yeah, I think it's all just, you have to know how people are. It's a lot more like your actual interactions with actual people. It doesn't log, as far as I could tell, any sort of standing meter. There's no Paragon Rogue sort of understanding of how you're doing with anybody. You just kind of have to go by what you think how they react to you and what you think they need as a person. It's pretty organic in that way, I think.
One thing you mentioned earlier was that people would hit you up on your phone or whatever it might be in the Cyberpunk universe. Is there how does that work? How do those conversations work? Is it just, oh, your phone buzzed and you've got one of two replies you can pick?
Yeah, pretty much that. You have the little phone icon down at the bottom of the screen at all times. So you can pull up your phone, you can make calls, you can get in touch with people. I'm not really sure how deep that might go. You can fire up anybody you've interacted with and, get them for side quests or whatever. There are times when you need to call people for story things. But mostly when they're interacting with you, it's like receiving a text message on your phone at home, and you just pull it up when you're ready for it. You get a little buzz, and like I said, you can neglect that and pull open your phone and have 40 messages from various people. I had that happen. So they're just kind of sitting there waiting for you. But yeah, it's mostly just text interactions where you have one or two replies at your disposal, and interacting with people in conversations, it feels like those choices might matter in a way that you don't necessarily see all the time. So try to treat people the way you want to be treated, that sort of thing, I guess.
All right, and so obviously there is another character who is in your head at all times, Johnny Silverhand, played by Keaunu Reeves. Obviously, you might have seen him in some marketing. You might have seen him. What's that relationship like then? Is he just on screen the entire time, or does he just pop out to say hello at certain moments in the story when it makes sense?
So it's more the latter. He is around all the time, and he is interjecting in story beats here and there. He just kind of appears on the scene, and he wanders around in the background, or he'll come and sit down and talk to you. You'll often have dialogue choices for Johnny as you're interacting with somebody else as well, and you can maybe choose between those. You can kind of blow him off if you want, but your relationship with Johnny is also one of these character relationships that seems to be evolving and changing over time as well. I had the CD Projekt dev who was kind of watching over my shoulder virtually as I was playing, asked me how I felt about my relationship with Johnny. It's something that you develop over time. And it's interesting because the story setup for Johnny is kind of an antagonistic one. You get that weird biochip in your head as part of the story. That's what brings Johnny into your life. He's kind of your imaginary Tyler Durden friend. But the stakes are that biochip is killing your character. And the way it works is Johnny's trapped on it, and it is designed to take over your body and turn you into Johnny Silverhand. So you're kind of not on great terms with him to start. He's sort of a bad influence on you. But how you treat him can change, I guess, that situation potentially. I kind of took him in a positive direction. I felt like we were more allies than antagonists, and we were kind of working toward the same goals. But he's an independent person, even though he's in your head, and he has an agenda of his own. So I don't really know exactly where that all would have gone, or whether it's the greatest idea to be best friends with the machine that's trying to take over your body. I'm not sure exactly.
It feels like, reminded when you said that you're having a conversation with an extra character and you can say things to Johnny. It reminds me a little bit of Caprica 6 and Gaius Baltar in Battlestar, where it's the figure in the head that only he can see, that only you can see, and you're still trying to have... I imagine that's going to be some good comic relief moments when you're trying to get something across to two separate people with two very different end games, I guess.
Yeah, It's similar, but not quite the same, because you can talk to Johnny without speaking out loud. So you're like talking to him in your head, basically. So you don't have to play two conversations at the same time, like in BSG, which is one of my favorite things about that show, though. So it's kind of sad that we don't get that.
Do those interactions with Johnny happen pretty naturally? Like, could you just be walking around the city and he could show up and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Or are they more story based? Like, okay, here's a cutscene, better expect Johnny to show up at some point.
They tend to happen when things are happening in the story, but then again, everything is kind of the story, right? Like, you're doing side quests and stuff. He's part of side quests. He's popping up all over, but he'll also pop up like when you're on the way to another place, for instance. Like, you've got an objective you're kind of headed toward, but you might be, diverted by some side quest or whatever, or random things that happen on the street. And so, like, just in transit, you sometimes have Johnny popping up and talking to you. He's just like kind of ever present. He's not always on screen. He's not always interacting with you, but he is always kind of like paying attention. And he will also like give you advice, and you don't necessarily have to take it, but he has a sense of how you should act in any given situation. There are characters that, he knew from his life 50 years earlier that he'll have input on. You don't necessarily have to take that. And I think that all counts too toward the idea of like how your relationship with him is going and what that might lead to. And I don't actually know. I didn't get that far. So we'll see how it develops.
It is wild to me. And then we saw those reports from earlier this week too, that a CDPR dev has put like 170 something hours in and still isn't at the end of the game. So definitely don't expect you to have all the answers, especially because I imagine some of those arcs are going to be very, very long. But I know in the title of this video, we've also put how does sex work in Cyberpunk. We talked a little bit about it last week, because obviously it's a very mature game, and it's we've seen sex workers in some of the trailers. They've talked a little about it. What was your kind of overall impression of how it's tackled in the game? I think especially comparing it to how it's tackled quite comically in The Witcher 3.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar to The Witcher 3, not necessarily the same. It's a little more straightforward and a little more graphic, but not especially so. Like it doesn't push too far. Like the CD Projekt doesn't want people banning their game and stuff. So like, there's some full frontal nudity. It's basically like you find a sex worker, you can interact with them, you can pay them, you cut to a cutscene of getting down to it, and like it's like 30 seconds of moaning and like movement and a little bit of nudity.
Fades out.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's
Mass Effect love theme plays.
Right. It's like I said, it's a little more like not quite pornographic, but a little bit more than The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3 is kind of like soft about it, I feel like, and this is a little more like but it's
about as much as you can get away with it.
Exactly.
Right. I was gonna say, and I use this with the heaviest of quotation marks, but as realistic as you can get in a futuristic, gritty setting like the one that Cyberpunk is set in.
Yeah, while also feeling like a video game. So
yeah. I was gonna say, and I mean, it's just kind of like a thing that you can do in the game, right? It doesn't have like stat buffs or anything from GTA or whatever.
Yeah, seemingly no. It's just a thing you could do if you feel like doing that. As for how those sort of relationships might pop up in the story or like affect your relationships with other characters, that I unfortunately have no idea, and CD Projekt would not tell me. I didn't get far enough interacting with any character to like create a relationship like that. I don't know how that might have changed anything, if it is possible. But yeah, the one just like find somebody on the street and pay them interaction that I tried was pretty like sectioned off. It didn't really have anything to do with anything. It's just a thing you can do. Like buying food in the game is a thing you can do, or getting clothes. It's just didn't really have any effect on anything. It's just one of those things that makes the city, I guess, feel a little more real, but just is sort of out there.
I was gonna say, definitely kind of leans into the liberal hedonistic lifestyle that they kind of, that's the core of Night City, I guess. It's like you can have anything you want as long as you can pay for it.
Yeah, there's absolutely a lot of that basically underpinning everything going on in the game. Sex is basically everywhere. all the time. So yeah, it feels like just one of those things that kind of plays into that theme and the feel of the place without necessarily mattering too much more than that.
Alright, well, I guess we can see for ourselves in a couple of very short weeks when Cyberpunk actually comes out. It feels very strange to be able to say that. But for everything to do with Cyberpunk 2077, we'll have you covered here on GameSpot.